Be inspired by everyday people and household names
who share their struggles, uplifting stories, and insights
with courage and authenticity,
empowering individuals
and the collective
to enhance our health,
expand our horizons,
and treasure the moments of our lives.
I'm Patty Teal.
And I'm Anthony Giannini.
Welcome to Everyday Enlightenment. Today, I'm joined by co-host Anthony Giannini, and we're interviewing a very special guest, Mela Gaskins Butcher. And many of you who are listening in the Santa Barbara area may remember her. She was a longtime resident. These days, she lives in San Luis Obispo. So, Anthony, I'm very excited about our guest. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Patty. Thank you. I'm very privileged to be on the show with you today, and I'm really happy to talk with our special guest, Mela.
Yeah, me too. So let me tell you a little bit about Mela. She holds a 5-year degree in Kia Chikitska Internal Ayurvedic Medicine and studied under the direction of Dr. Jyoti Ananda. She also holds a Master's of Science from the University of Washington in Psychoneuroimmunology. Now, honestly, I had to look that one up, but basically, it's the brain's influence on the immune system, and she can tell us more about that, which I'm sure has always been important, but in these times where people are so stressed, it may be even more so. So, Anthony, you have more information about Mela?
Mela is also the founder and director of the Center for Ayurveda, which has been in existence since 1990. Mela has been practicing Ayurveda since 1990 and has personally overseen more than 20,000 individual medical cases working within the Ayurvedic medical model, which is a lot of cases.
It's a lot of cases.
That is a lot. I was teasing Mela when we talked before the show that she was a real slacker, because she does so much. And she's a frequent author, lecturer, and teacher trainer on the subjects of yoga and Ayurveda in the United States and abroad. And best of all, if you meet her, you're most likely going to find her with a big smile on her face. Welcome, Mela.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I'm happy to be here.
So I guess we should start with the first basic question. Many people may already know this, but what is Ayurvedic medicine?
Sure. So Ayurveda means the science of life, and it sprang from the Saraswati civilization of the Indus Valley, which is modern day northern India or Afghanistan. And it's an original traditional medicine that is integrationist, and that it is looking at the healing of the body, mind, and spirit of the beloved, which is what we call patients, the beloved. So it's had a long and rich history. It's been influenced by many generations of very wise people asking very important questions. So much of the Ayurvedic medical model has been codified or organized in what we call the Vedas, which are those classic texts, the oldest continually used spiritual texts on the planet, actually. And these Vedas collected information trying to answer the question that was originally asked and asked repeatedly over many generations. And that question was, out of all the seeming chaos of the world, is it possible that there's some underlying order to the universe? And if there is, wouldn't it behoove us to learn what those laws are, what these universal laws might be, and then to have our lifestyle reflect harmony with those laws? And from that sprang the whole architectural philosophy and structure of Ayurvedic medicine. So like any medicine, it has schools like internal medicine or pediatrics, etc. But like any integrationist medicine, it's very interested in the development and strengthening of the body, the mind, the spirit, and the psychology of the individual, rather than seeing the human experience as a system of levers or chemical reactions that we just throw this at and it's going to be fine. So also, like traditional Chinese medicine, it's based on what we call the 5-element theory, which I can get into in a minute. So it's a long, ancient medicine springing from that area. And actually, something that a lot of people don't know. You know the Hippocratic oath that medical doctors take at the beginning, right, of
Yes.
their practice.
We've all heard of
First,
that.
first, do no harm. It comes directly from the Vedas, and our very first edict is called Ahimsa, Ahimsa. First, do no harm. So Hippocrates and Plato and Aristotle all studied very deeply, among many other forward thinkers, studied the Vedas. They are really a quite rich and profound historical group of texts.
Oh, that is so fascinating. What do you think about that, Anthony? It really integrates so many different things into one practice.
Well, I'm a cultural anthropologist and I study cross-comparative religious studies and spirituality across ancient timelines, modern and traditional. And so I've come across Ayurvedic medicine across my studies in Chinese medicine, looking into Taoism, looking into shamanism. And so, yes, what Mela says is true. And I feel very privileged to be talking with Mela as she is a master practitioner.
Right. And I didn't know that it was associated with the five elements either. That's really news to me. A lot of times you hear about the doshas, and you're different people are always asking, what are you? Are you a Pitta? Are you, what are the three that they talk about, Mela? So that's another part of it too, isn't it?
Would you like to hear my sort of 5-minute elevator organization of a
We
5,000
would
year old
love
medicine? Okay,
that.
wish me luck.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
You're ready.
Okay, here we go. So, according to Ayurveda, everything in manifested creation is vibrational in nature. And that once that vibration, be it a note, a color, right, the sound of someone's voice, once that vibration manifests into the physical world, it takes a kind of a shape. And the five elements are from least to most dense. Once these things are manifested into shapes, they are space, previously referred to as ether. That's what contains everything. Air, fire, water, and earth. And so if you take the qualities of space and air together, that creates a body-mind type, which we call the dosha, a body-mind type called vata. And I'll circle back around to that. If we take the fire and water elements, that's a constitutional type that we call pitta. That's like steam. If vata is like wind, pitta is like steam and the qualities of steam. And if we take the earth and water elements and combine them, that gives us a dosha called kapha. When you think kapha, think of the qualities of mud. And that's not a pejorative term. So one of the first places I try to take listeners or trainees or patients in understanding why this medicine really works is that if we understand the laws of how physics work, right? We know we put out fire using either water or earth. We don't blow air on it, right? We try to use certain elements to subdue the excess. So our core axiom in Ayurveda is that opposites cure. So rather than even trying to get into the abstract conversation about the doshas, dosha, by the way, means that which clouds. That which clouds what? Clouds our ability to perceive reality clearly. We even have in the English vernacular an understanding of the three main body-mind types. Oh, she's an airhead, vata.
Oh.
Ah, he's hot under the collar, pitta.
Ah.
She's a stick in the mud, kapha. So this individual is simply expressing their natural genetic predisposition to go out of balance because they've got a lot of those elemental qualities within their body-mind energy blueprint. Okay, so I'd say that the fastest way that people can understand how we start to organize the prescription for our patients by determining how nature made them, called their dosha, I'd say drop the whole dosha love affair and just think of the qualities. So the qualities of vata are not limited to, but very much like this, like the wind: fast, irregular, variable, excitable, inspirational, dry, cool, moving, right? So like wind, also roughening. When wind goes over your skin, it roughens a bit, right? And then pitta, steam, the qualities of steam, intense. Oh, did I say cool for vata? It's very important that I say cold because that's important.
Okay.
Pitta, intense, warm to hot, breaks up oil, right? So it can cause oil on the skin. Kind of the middle child of the doshas, not too extreme on either end. And then we have the kapha, the mud, steady, earthy, sweet, dependable, but also maybe slow moving, a little, possessive or jealous, these kind of things. So even in just hearing those qualities, your mind might have been going, I'm recognizing some of those, right? I'm actually recognizing a number of those qualities. And that might be because the majority of humans on the planet are actually what we call a dual doshic type, a pitta vata or a kapha pitta, and so on, meaning that those elements are all part of getting the team of 5 horses to pull the cart off the middle road. Yeah. So dual doshic is about 60-something% of the population typically. Singular doshic, like just pitta, just vata, just kapha, is about 30-something%. And then we have a third rare type called tridosha, or tridoshic, either one. And they're the equal opportunity employers of the element. They have a little bit of everything going on. So if we have time to get into the seasonal considerations today, it's really with our tridoshics, that 3%, that we really, every season, subtly change their program, their protocol, their recommendations to account for the fact that they're presenting like the dominance of that season, the elemental dominance of the season.
It's fascinating. Oh my goodness. And is that one of the first things you have to determine when you're helping someone who comes to you for some sort of healing?
That's correct. The first thing we do is there are many hundreds of diagnostic questions and measures and points that we could have when we do the initial intake. But at least 30 to 35 questions will be asked of everyone, like in Chinese medicine and like in allopathic or Western medicine. We will determine things going on with your eyes, your tongue, but also other more really important things like, what's the speed of your speech? How did you fill out the paperwork? Are you panting, or is your breath very shallow? So we really look at the way that that individual moves through the world, through diagnostic points. And then, yes, the first thing we do is we make their doshic diagnostic. We determine their dosha. And again, for the earlier practitioners, it seems like that's really very important. But having done this for many decades, I can tell you that that's just the starting point. That we really believe in Ayurveda that the majority of suffering is because of a mistake of observing how the world is actually made. That we don't have, as physicians or practitioners, the answers, that they're the physician, that they have all the information. We're the mere mechanic. We have all this information about the tools, and then we give those tools to the actual physician, the beloved, and we help them to use those tools so that they are self-healing. If we don't try to make ourselves obsolete, we have to question our motives.
Oh my goodness. I can see why you were attracted to psychoneuroimmunology, because it very much is an adjunct to this, isn't it? They kind of fit together like a hand in a glove, don't they?
Completely. I'd say that I got very lucky because PNI, as it's shortened, Psychoneuroimmunology, was a brand new degree. In the 80s, it was just really starting to have some legs. And the first degrees were right about when I was graduating. So when people say, what is psychoneuroimmunology? I basically say this. It's the study of how what you think about matters. If you can get dominion over your mind, and your mind has tendencies, your mind is a habitual beast, right? Maybe you tend toward negative thinking like a majority of people because the brain evolved to remember the negative. I'm sure Anthony knows this from his anthropological studies of ancient brains, and we see what happens over time. And in order to survive, we remembered what not to do so that we could continue with the species, right? So
That's very important.
Right? It's important. We don't want to be too harsh on ourselves if we think, oh, my mind is feeble, it's so negative. Why am I always thinking the worst of myself or of other people? Or why do I have all this negative mental gossip? It's because your ancestors survived and brought you here. So we've learned that it's not something to be ashamed of or something that we want to try to change wholesale. We have very specific practices, many of them ancient, that are guaranteed to change your neurology, guaranteed to change your brainwave state. We can take you from a brainwave state of beta, which is I'm a stress cat brainwave state, to a state of alpha, calm attention, and even to a state of theta, which is a very beautiful state to be in. It's a very creative state to be in. We call it the hypnagogic state, right? We can put the brainwave state into coherence and into harmonization rather than the scattered look of the brainwave state in the beta state by simple 5-minute practices. And when we hook you up to fMRIs and we show what a simple 5-minute practice can do, be it a breathing exercise or meditation or certain yoga sequences or certain mantra, the recitation of sounds, when we see this, it now leaves no shadow of a doubt that more than just the placebo effect or wishful thinking or just breathing quietly for 5 minutes, we're seeing very distinct brainwave pattern changes, and very quickly. You don't have to wait for years. You can change the way that you've heard the saying, what fires together wires together. Well, we're really interested in remapping the brain and building better neural connections. That's what a mind that feels like it's stable and solid and can be depended on. I call it a mind that you have dominion over, rather than it trying to rule the roost through all of its fears. When you have dominion over your mind, life gets to be great, good fun. You just don't worry. You know that, oh, this is happening now, but I can reverse that in 5 minutes with these practices.
And don't they call the hypnagogic state the state between awake and asleep? And we've all had that for brief periods. It's just the best thing in the world. And don't you think that's when you're able to manifest your life to change or to make things happen?
Well, wow, now here's a 2-hour conversation right there. I've absolutely studied and love the quantum field. And what I also love, I have to say, Patty, is that these great rishis or sadhus, the great wise ones that wrote all of this down, or actually burned it into papyrus thousands of years ago, they didn't know anything about the quantum field. They didn't know anything about the quantum suit. And they were describing that we really were like what now physics says the universe is, right? So yes, in that hypnagogic state, what's happening is that you've lost the personality. You've lost what we call the ahamkara, the I shape. And now what's so-called there and what's so-called here, it's not so important to you. You happen to be in that state where all feels like one. And a classic example of the hypnagogic state is you're driving and all of a sudden you sort of come to and you go, gosh, how did I get to the last 5 miles? I was on autopilot. And they say that in that state, not only is it much easier to manifest because you're not throwing up all the barriers of, oh, I can't do that because I'm not too much like my father or mother, but also you're in that quantum field where everything is possible, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I want to study with you, and you do lots of trainings, don't you? How about you, Anthony? I think we could learn a thing or two, don't you?
I have so much to learn. I know far less right now than I did this time 1 year ago.
Yeah. Or maybe if we're all paying attention, we all sense that we know less because we get more integrated, and it just, I don't know, I'm of two minds about that. Well, first of all, thank you. And I'd be happy to work with you in any way that the fates want us to work together. But it's true that the world is moving at such a pace now in terms of the sharing of these holy sciences that I actually have a very positive outlook for the future. I'm seeing more and more patients, beloveds, I really don't like using that word, but I've seen more and more that come into their healing trajectory with me already so informed and already having so many tools. And that certainly wasn't the case 30 years ago. It was really like starting from scratch. And I believe this is because we have more and more information being disseminated. People have they're more open to alternative forms of healing.
Wow, that is so very fascinating. So why don't we talk a little about who you teach, because I know you do teacher trainings, but you also do healing. So who do you work with, your beloveds?
Yeah. Well, the bulk of my work is still with one-on-one sessions with my beloveds, and they're sessions just like any appointment with a physician. But the difference is that we really take the work with these individuals as seeing it as their psychological, their physiological, the biological, of course, right? And their spiritual development as being all equally important. And spiritual is one of those soft words. You're not quite sure what it means, but I would say it has to do with how you feel you're relevant in the universe. And if you see the world, as the universe is essentially a place of support or a place that's here to cause you injury and harm. So sessions with clients, yes. And then I also have an 18-month Ayurvedic certification program. I have now, I think, 5 or 7, 8 graduates now who've completed the 18-month training. And they're out there in the world taking care of people. And the reason this aspect of my work is so important to me is that I was trained in what we call the Gurukula tradition, Gurukula. And that means the one-on-one transmission of the lineage, the Kriya lineage, the Ayurvedic lineage, as taught by our teachers, 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 teacher. So I can go all the way back to the 1800s and name every single one of the teachers in our lineage. So it's a pure lineage. And what I've seen, like many people have seen, is that yoga and many other modern takes on ancient practices have become diluted. And so my passion project, as I was telling Anthony yesterday, is to be able to train as many individuals in this classic form, because we don't know anyone else that's still doing it that way. So I sit with the trainees once a week on the phone and by email, and we discuss their own personal week. We discuss their own development. So they're the living embodiment of how Ayurveda is touching their lives. So they're living it. Then we do the curricula, all of the academic aspect. And it's taught in the way that it was always meant to be taught. So it's oral. My curricula that I've written is recorded, then they listen to it, then they transcribe it, then they read it back. So the idea is that it's learning in triplicate and they'll never forget it. And then they have shadows at the end. They have 25 clients that they see that I shadow, and then we start to launch them. So that's my passion project before I retire. I'd love to see really classically trained Vedyas, that's the name of an Ayurvedic practitioner or physician. It means the one who's been given the knowledge. And I'd like to see as many of those as possible, graduated and in the world doing the real thing. And then the second offering is I have a 3-month botanical medicine course that I've written and recorded. Same thing. I meet with them once a week. We discuss plans. We learn the art of wildcrafting. We learn contraindications. We learn which part of the plant is used. And they learn what I consider to be the top 100 to know for healing, both that are classic and also that can be found in the place that they live. And then I've written curricula and teacher training manuals for companies like Yoga Works and so on. But right now my focus really is on the trainings and then my work one-on-one with clients.
Oh my gosh. Anthony, I have a question, but I'm going to let you go next because I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. So you have something,
fantastic,
a
Mela.
burning desire.
I would just like to comment on the significance of Mela, you studying such a traditional lineage so directly. I'd like to speak on that as an anthropologist because I've studied cultures from around the world and all these different spiritual practices or lineages or traditions that are specific and sacred to the carriers of such traditions and lineages. So I just hope that our listeners know how special it is that you have such direct lineage training and that it's available in the United States of all places in what is now the future, 2020. So I'd like to recognize you for that and thank you for your dedication for learning and practicing and dedicating your life to this.
Yes, thank you. We're so honored to have you. I mean, it's just like someone who has this wealth of knowledge. It's just such a pleasure to talk to you. My question, Mela, is many people are of the belief that no matter what your physical ailment is, a back problem, a leg problem, whatever it is, that it stems from some sort of an emotional issue. Is that your belief as well from your training?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd start by saying partially, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that absolutely everything matters. Nature and nurture. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Endogenous and exogenous influences, what you're bringing into your body and into your mind, as well as where you live. Are you living in 117-degree weather and it's humid? Are you living?
I am.
I kind of said that because I know how warm it is in Sedona. There. You poor darlings.
I know.
So see emotions, the Latin root for the word emotion is emovere, to be disturbed.
Mhm.
And emotions, what they really are is they're like your global positioning system to tell you whether you are or are not in harmony with the present moment based on what you have been doing with the recent and not so recent past. So our emotions are indicators, as I see them, of what needs to be looked at and to be addressed. So I would say this, that we all have a way, a tendency to deal with that which makes us uncomfortable, be it a past trauma, be it something that happened yesterday, be it some self-limiting belief we have about ourselves. We all have a way of handling it. And if we try to suppress our emotions, of course, we know that doesn't work. If we're too emotive, we know that that also keeps our neural network firing, looking for the same thing. So one thing I have to say about emotions is that, and Anthony might be able to back me up on this too, we also know that the human being is pretty heavily addicted to stress hormones, that the level of stress that you have, as you start to change and transform and become more, have more joy, ease, and lightness in your everyday experience of who you are and how you move in the world, at first, it will feel very uncomfortable. You won't know what's going on. Your subconscious will try to push you back into the old neural firing. So emotions are good to be able to understand what they're saying, and having the mind be able to, in the very discreet, and as Dr. Dispenza calls it, the generous moment, moment by moment, breath by breath, have enough awareness, we call that prajna, have enough judicious awareness in any given moment that we catch that rising old story, and then we have certain practices that we do. One of my favorites, I'll give your listeners and the both of you something that's been extremely powerful for many of my patients. It's so simple. It's almost as if you can't believe it works, but it works. You may have learned that the prefrontal cortex and the brain in general doesn't know the difference between what you're imagining and what's actually happening. So the more you mentally rehearse something, the more the brain says, oh, so that's reality. That's why Olympic athletes are trained to mentally rehearse ahead of time, right? Let's say you're having a thought. Let's say that your self-limiting belief is that I'm not good enough for this social occasion, right? Nobody likes me, something like this. What you do is that rising, if you have the awareness in the moment, as that thought arises, you ask the question, do I know with absolute certainty that that is true? Because none of us are soothsayers and have crystal balls. We know that that cannot. We can never say, yes, do I know with absolute certainty that's true? Nobody here likes me. We can't know the answer. So then here's where the magic happens. We then ask the follow-up question. Without asking this, the medicine doesn't happen. We then ask, could the exact opposite be true? Which in this case would infer, oh, everybody likes me, I'm so likable. And then we don't try to go looking for proof to the answer. And something happens in the brain, particularly the PFC, prefrontal cortex. The brain is a goal-seeking machine, and its structural tension is what is built when you ask a question you don't have the answer to. At the subconscious level, which is like the bottom of the glacier, 2,000 feet as opposed to 10 feet above water, the power of the subconscious starts to, in the background, run the program to solve that problem. What happens over the next few hours or days? The subconscious starts looking for, is it possible that I'm really well liked? And now, without lifting a finger, just by asking that question, without trying to answer it, the subconscious does all the work for you. So that's just one example of something that we might give to a client to help them change that neural netting that's happened in their life.
Neural netting, that's a really interesting term, isn't it? I love your description earlier that everything is vibration, and Anthony being a sound healer, and I've always been into sound and music. I feel so strongly that that is indeed the case. I read a book years ago called the Music of Yoga, The Sound of Yoga. It was fascinating because it went back to the earliest sounds and how it affects everything. Now, yeah, and you teach so many different kinds of yoga, don't you, Mela? Have you integrated them all together? Or are they separate practices?
I used to also teach yoga in
Mhm.
studios, and I had my own studio for a while. And I did teach the Hatha, Iyengar, Bhakti styles. I did teach all of those as well as restorative, but I haven't been doing yoga teaching to the public. What I do now is I draw on all of those different yoga schools when I'm prescribing. So the modalities of a treatment would be nutrition, lifestyle practices like, when they should rise and go to sleep, but also yoga sequences potentially that are known to have specific effects on the person's biochemistry, right? So I do integrate all of those when I do integrate that as part of their prescription for their program.
Well, you are so impressive the way you can integrate all these different schools of knowledge and put them together and help people. That's amazing.
Anything I have, I owe all to my gurus, Dr. Ananda, Dr. Dadlani, and Dr. Soni, who were spiritual masterminds as far as I'm concerned, and took me under their wing, and I studied with them for many years, even after starting my own practice. And I just give it all back to my gurus.
Oh my goodness. So Anthony, do you have any burning questions before we have to say goodbye to Mela today?
Well, Mela, I just want to thank you again. And I think I'd like to maybe pose a meditation for our listeners as we close out the show. Maybe if you could, we've shared some of the neurological benefits of breathing and yogic practices and Ayurvedic lifestyles. So we know the science, and we're starting to see that in the modern world. But how about your personal experience? Can you just describe to the listeners or to us and share your heartfelt truth about your own personal experience, spiritual or otherwise, and some of the treasures that you've received over the years?
Do you mean by following the Ayurvedic lifestyle, or by meditation in particular?
Through your own experiences in the Ayurvedic lifestyle and through your meditation practices that have resulted in such lifestyle.
I'd be happy to. Well, you've heard of course you have, you're an anthropologist, Joseph Campbell's, the wounded healer archetype. Well, that was me. I was, as a child, any photograph that I can actually probably show you, a photograph of me as a child. I show this to patients that don't believe me when I tell them what a sad little puff I was. This is me as a child trying to smile and look really, really happy for the photographer. That was me as perky as I got, okay? So there's proof that I grew up as a pretty depressed, very introverted person. And I had a health issue, and my parents sent me to Dr. Ananda, who was an Ayurvedic internist, because they were yogis in the Kriyavan tradition, and he was their doctor. And after 7 months of working with his Ayurvedic protocol, I was a completely different person. I had lost 20 pounds. I was confident. I was comfortable looking people in the eyes. I wasn't whispering and mumbling. People didn't have to say, "What was that? I couldn't hear you." I was such a mumbler, because as a kapha dominant, I was very in and down with my energies. So by the diet and the breath practices like breath of fire, and the invigorating yoga practices, and nature prescriptions and certain botanical medicines, and of course my diet, which took a lot of the sweet and the heavy earthy foods out, I transformed. The excess dominance of the earth element in me and a bit of the water element was transformed and reintegrated. And as long as I follow the basic guidelines of don't put too much of the earth qualities, like I'd eat ice cream every day of my life, even today if I could, but I can't. I know it's not going to be good, right? I can touch it lightly, maybe have a bite, but it's not okay. So as long as I maintain that, then I just feel really good all the time. I feel good, sleep well, great appetite, and I have no health complaints whatsoever. So I'd say in general, that's what transformed for me and why I fell in love with it, because there was no doubt it was real. And then in meditation, I just don't know who I'd be without it. It fortifies, strengthens, elevates, and mostly it brings me to what Ayurveda considers to be the ultimate goal of everything, which is it brings me to moksha. M-O-K-S-H-A, that means freedom. Freedom from the small self. Freedom from forgetting the reality of this beautiful world, which is that everything is interconnected and everything has the potential to uplift and help everything else. Meditation will take the accumulation of stresses that start to bubble up in any physiological system, any mental system, and it brings me back to set point, which is the now.
Wow, that was beautiful, Mela. We can't leave without you sharing your contact information, where your website, and how people might get in touch with you.
Sure, yeah. And I look forward to speaking more with both of you to support your visions too. You're both fascinating. So, and I know this was my half hour, but I would love to talk to both of you for even longer.
Oh.
My website, people can find me at centerforayurveda.com. Ayurveda is spelled AYURVEDA.com. And happy to answer any questions people have about anything.
And is there an email address too, Mela?
Sure. info@centerforayurveda.com.
Well, it would certainly be my pleasure to have more conversations with you. So we can't thank you enough for being our guest today.
You're both so beautiful. I want to talk to you more about what you're doing, okay?
That would be lovely.
Thanks for tuning in to Everyday Enlightenment. To subscribe, listen to past episodes, or if you'd like to be featured on Everyday Enlightenment, visit hubforpodcasting.com.